So my name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about industrial control systems, remote access, and security, and how to strike a balance between I just need to get my job done, and you're doing what now to my network. And one of the ways we're going to talk about doing that is how to get the remote access you need without a VPN that gives an overbroad access. And the VPN is a complicated topic. People love their VPNs. The VPN usually performs very well for certain activities, but as a system integrator, it can be troublesome because each customer might have a different one. They might have different users for them. They may be difficult to install side by each, but effectively you're joining two networks together, and that can be risky for all parties involved. So how do we sort of bridge that gap? We're here to talk about an approach that involves identity, not new identities, but existing ones, so single sign-on, security, and so on under a concept called zero trust, which is what we do. So my name is Don Bowman. I'm the founder of the company, and you're welcome to reach out to me afterwards with your comments and concerns. But in a nutshell, I'm passionate about networking, passionate about cloud, passionate about security, and this is a space that I think I can really make a difference in. And today what we're going to talk about is the specific remote access and security challenges of industrial control systems. So industrial control systems, pretty broad topic. It could be Modbus or SCADA. It could be the web interface of an HMI. It could be an ERP system. And they're all over the map. There's no one standard. These are not modern, born in the cloud, RESTful applications. They may be message bus based like MQTT, or they may be very much Ethernet based. They could be for very deeply embedded and older systems, such as a PLC, and they could be something a little bit more modern, like an HMI, but even then it might be some sort of embedded platform. And one of the challenges there is there just aren't security updates for those. There's not even research into what security vulnerabilities they often have. And that makes people very nervous about what can get to it east-west in my own organization, north-south from the internet in. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can reduce the time and complexity of getting connected to those things, so you still have a full audit trail, but who did what when without having to have client software installed. And that's intended to help address your customers' security requirements. They may want multi-factor authentication, and that may be prove challenging because you've got 5 users on your team and they're giving you one account, and how do you share that? The answer is you don't share it. There's a way that you can have each of your users have an independent single sign-on and meet their objections. And I'm going to give you a quick live demonstration, show you, what we've been up to and what we've done with some of our customers, which include things like municipal water supply and energy systems. And more importantly, we're going to show you how to keep these critical systems from creeping onto the public internet while still retaining access. So that's what it's all about, is that simple, frictionless, if I could just pretend that every one of these devices was as if it was on the public internet. That's what I want. I just want it to be easy. The HMI is a website. I click and I go there. The PLC is just an IP and a port, and I just open it. That's what I want as an end user. I have to connect the VPN, and it disconnects my local network, and my licensing servers on the local network, and therefore it breaks. And they have routes there that don't route back to me, or I have to use a really slow VNC client. You just want that simple, frictionless access, and that's really what we do. So the challenges. So here's my problem statement. I like starting this out with the problem statement. And the implied is that I have an answer to the problem, although I don't have an answer to all of the problems. So the first one is industrial systems have almost no security. Buffer overflows, there's no encryption. Sorry, my lights in here are motion sensor based. Buffer overflows, there's no encryption, there's single shared password, unchangeable hardware, no upgrades, decades old software. If I say hands up if you have this problem, I don't even have to guess. You've all got your hands up with that problem. And it's not like there's a little bit of cash that suddenly makes this problem go away. You're talking about even the brand new things you buy have this. So, it's not like it's just the decision of last decade. But there's a device, it's bolted to my wall. It's not particularly internet style secure, and I'm going to live with that for the next decade. So if Darwin had its way, these all would have died out. They would have been breeding with each other, and these ones would have not had children, but that's not unfortunately how computer systems work. Each of these systems is maintained by specialists. So companies that have more than one staff, and those companies have staff rotation. So you might be a system integrator and you might support 5 customers and you might have 5 people on your team. And every year one person leaves and you hire one. And then you're adding and deleting customers. Pretty soon you have a spreadsheet somewhere that says passwords.xls, and everybody that's ever worked with you has it and all your customers have it. And sooner or later somebody does something they shouldn't and bad things occur. Let's talk about how we can fix that. Make it simple, single sign-on, and you fix that problem. A lot of people say, okay, these things aren't safe to be accessed remotely. I want to force you on site. I want to look in your beady little eyes and give you a security badge and fingerprint you and so on. The reality is nobody wants that anymore. COVID made that even harder to do, but even without that, these sites would be inconvenient locations that involved rental cars and trains, planes, automobiles. And you're charging your customer by the hour for this, but it's also not the most effective use of your capital. You might be charging them $100 an hour, but that person might have been able to do $200 an hour worth of work somewhere else. The problem for the operator, when they allow remote, they're importing the business risk of their suppliers, and it's all of their suppliers at once. So as soon as that VPN's hooked up, ransomware can spread between these networks. Sometimes the routes aren't very precise. There's a way to get back through it. The printer on that remote side is available on this side, etc. And it's really this Gordian knot of complexity. Like, how do you cut one piece of it without something, sort of happening there? So if I expand that problem statement, I say, well, how can we solve it? So a lot of people solve this with remote desktop solutions. TeamViewer, ConnectWise, these are very popular. There are lots of them, obviously. And they give very broad access. So you put a PC inside the secure enclave, and then you put a single identity on that PC, and then you share it to a bunch of people and say you sign it with TeamViewer, and now it's like you were in front of the keyboard. The problem is that machine, it has what we call east-west access. It can get to everything, and everything can get to it, and there's no audit trail. So once you're on there, you can do anything you want, and it might even mean inserting a USB key remotely through the TeamViewer into it, and that USB key might have a problem, might have ransomware on it. You might open a document that has something, and it just walks all through the network. There's no different identity. All users on that PC become one identity. So that makes people really reluctant to broaden the access. They're like, oh, trust but verify, to quote Reagan. Like, I'm willing to let you in, but I kind of want to know what you've done. And it can't be by company or whatever. It needs to be by person. The VPN provides a layer 3 access for all. So the VPN, effectively, you can ping everything on the network. You can put rules on to reduce what that is, but sooner or later, it has to be everywhere. And connecting those networks is like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. It doesn't usually work out well. The routes might overlap, or you might need a default route on that network. The machines might not route back to you. Some of the protocols aren't routable at all. They're just Ethernet or layer 2. People come and go. Shared credentials are forever. If shared credentials are part of your workflow, you're going to have a bad time on an audit or on something worse than an audit. That's the problem statement. So if you think about the typical scenarios, I've got a different way for connecting to every site I manage. This is kind of the expensive part. I've got a laptop called customer A and a laptop called customer B, and they each have a different VPN software installed because the two fight with each other, or I can't have the same keys on each, or something like that. Or you've got virtual machines that you run, and everybody remote desktops to the virtual machine, and then it goes onwards. That's how we did it at my last company. Not breaking any NDAs here, but it really wasn't that great for our customers. All the people on my support team could basically remote desktop to a machine that was VPN in the customer, and sort of don't ask, don't tell. Who knows how great an idea that was. People complain the VPN is not reliable. It takes too long to connect. There's packet loss that impacts it. And my customer, their IT team has requirements that are just hard to meet. They require me to have multi-factor authentication, but the thing I'm reaching is SSH. And how do I put a second factor in there? It's all encrypted end to end, and I just don't know what to do. Or it's a PLC. It's just this port from Rockwell. What does multi-factor mean when there isn't even a first factor? So those are the typical scenarios that I'm going to talk about some solutions here today. So the challenge, security, accessibility. People say have one or the other, but not both. I'm here to say you can have both. You can have a highly secure system that is also highly accessible. You can do it without having shared credentials. You can do it without bringing a VPN into play. You can do it with multi-factor. You can sign in to a remote system the same way you sign into Office 365 or your Gmail. You sign in once and you just click and you're signed in again. You can use the same multi-factor, the phone, was it you, the TOTP, one-time code, etc., and do it in a way that works across all the protocols. And it's done with an identity-aware proxy, which is how we implement our solution. So bringing this into the industrial control system space, the first thing you have to solve is who. Who is this user? There's three phases of the problem. Who are you? What are you allowed to do? How do I get you there? So on the first, my solution is I don't introduce a new who. There's no new users. All of the users that flow through our system have an existing account in Microsoft Azure AD, Office 365, or Google G Suite, or Apple ID. If you think one of your users doesn't have one of those identities, you're wrong. 100% of the people that have a mobile phone have one of those identities. 100% of the people who work in a corporate world have one of those identities. My strategy is to leverage it so you single sign on to your customer's XYZ system via your Office 365 identity. Your customer will accept that because you're now handling the who. If one of the people on your team leaves, they know that you're going to remove them from your Office 365. Every person's an individual, every person has single sign-on. The customer owns the what. What are you allowed to do? People in this group can do X. Okay, you're in that group because Microsoft said you were, and therefore I'm willing to trust that. Now, what is X? You're okay, you can reach this PLC, but read only, or something like that. And the access to how. A lot of the sites we talk about, they don't have public IP access. They don't have an inbound ability. They don't have, they're behind cellular or NAT, maybe satellite, maybe Starlink. And you can't port forward something from the router. Our system is outbound only and HTTP only. So we install a tiny piece of software inside that site. It makes an outbound HTTP connection to our cloud. The users come back into our cloud. We join those two. And then over that HTTP connection, we run something called WebSocket, which allows us to do TCP connectivity and remote desktop and VNC and PLC and all of those things. That's how it works. So if you solve the who, the what, the how, you've made everybody happy. That's what we need to do. So we talk a lot about zero trust. Zero trust obviously has a ton of traction in the last couple of years. The concept came out sort of 2009 era. We talked about the squishy internal center and said we can't really treat security now as a moat around the middle. We have to worry about what's inside. Fast forward a bunch, and both of the last two U.S. Presidential things, there's been executive orders around zero trust for their suppliers, for their agencies. That's in turn flowed down to an agency called CISA, which does the critical infrastructure security under our Department of Homeland Security, all of which have ratified a standard called Zero Trust, which was standardized by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And in a nutshell, it marries authentication and authorization in a fine-grained fashion. So instead of saying, I am who I say I am, therefore I have access to the world, which is what a VPN is, you say resource X, role Y, user Z, those three joined are allowed. And that's what zero trust is all about. There's no inherent trust based on where you physically are. There's no inherent trust based on a VPN being up. VPN's like a long Ethernet cable. Instead, every individual resource challenges you and says, are you who you say you are? Or are you trying to do what you're allowed to me, pairwise? So you don't sign into the network, you sign into the resource being a PLC, an HMI, firewall, router, SSH, whatever. So I mentioned CISA earlier. There are other organizations out there that are all pitching this as well. The standard, you can go and read, it's a big umbrella. In a nutshell, that first thing I said there, that idea of, do I know who you are on a per resource basis? Are you doing what you said you would? That's zero trust. That boils down into 100 documents, each with 100 pages. But that's the core concept there. And it's been formally adopted by the US government under those executive orders, but also by other agencies, other bodies, other regulatory standards, et cetera. And you're going to see this blow through the entire industry. This is going to become a best practice, and everybody's going to be implementing it because it's easier and it's more secure. It means that things can't walk sideways. It means I know who did what when. It means I can pinpoint control. That person can get there. What we do differently is we allow the who to be broader. We allow the who to include suppliers, vendors, service providers, system integrators, et cetera. Why shouldn't the manufacturer be able to securely sign in and debug the system with you? You want that, they want that, the service contract calls for it. Why should they have to have a shadow account created in your VPN that they sort of don't tell anybody about, and on audit people complain about? That's the thing we want to talk about here. So coming back to that who, what, how, the who, we partner with the world's best identity providers, whether it be Okta, whether it be Google, whether it be Microsoft. There's a standard called OpenID Connect. Every person you work with has an account in one of these public systems, and you can use that to identify them publicly without a new username and password. You've seen a website that says sign in with Google. That's what it's doing. It's not giving them access to your Google account. It's allowing Google to attest who you are in an anonymous way towards it. The second is centralize that authorization management. VPN, it brings it into one spot in the sense that you're on off, but it's all the way through. The other approach is that every application individually has local users and local passwords in it. And it's very, very difficult to manage. Now you have a hard time auditing. This person that we no longer work with, that they removed from all of the systems. I think so. Let me go check this old Windows CE HMI. Uh-oh, there's still an account there. And then the last one is that identity-aware web application firewall. That's the proxy that gets the outbound only connectivity, which helps people with their firewalls. They don't have to worry about, pinholing inbound firewall rules and ports and run out of public IPs to do port forwarding. To it's HTTPS. We can inspect it in our inspecting firewall. We know 100% what's going where and when. And there's this thing called a JWT, a JSON Web Token. I know who the user is on every action. That's the methodology. So maybe just before I finish the motivation, I'm going to show a short demo here, and it'll give you an idea. I'll show a sample HMI and how I'd access it from remote. I'll show a sample remote desktop, and I'll show a sample, maybe a shared directory where the logs of the system are based. But you can imagine that there's a lot of different types of users that need sort of semi-shared access. The HMI might be used by the operator, but also by maybe the partner that runs the system for them, and maybe also by the integrator that constructed it or programmed it. The PLC might be the same. The operator might be reading tags, and the integrator might need to upgrade the firmware in it. You might have thin clients, web apps like BT SCADA or Inductive that you both need access some of the time to debug something together or maybe to operate it. The key is that there's no single identity provider across these pools. That's why you need to federate it together, that unifying authentication that you can then use for precise authorization, that you can then use for very simple access. That's what these users are each looking for. So what does it look like for the end user? A black screen, he says. Well, let me just switch over and share my window. And okay. So I'm going to give you just a really short demonstration. This is not going into any great detail. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, this is an optional component. It's a launch pad. We call it profile, and it just has an icon for every individual thing. You don't have to use it because in our system, everything is its own public URL, and you can just launch it. In fact, that's what I'm going to show you in a second, is I'll show you the HMI that way. But it gives you an idea. These are, as an end user, I'm already signed in. These are my access, my applications. I can see some files, and I can load them right here in the browser. Imagine this is on your customer site. It's a piece of industrial equipment. There's a directory full of syslog files, and you don't want to be copying them back all the time. You want to be able to browse them. You can do it in the browser, but you can also mount it on your desktop. So you use a protocol called WebDAV. We can get to desktops individually. So we support VNC and remote desktop. So if I was to open the VNC, it's right in the browser. I'm already signed in. It knows who I am. You can see this live because the googly eyes do their thing. And I'm just on this machine. It's just like I was there. VNC allows multiple hands on the same keyboard at the same time. You can have a read-only session. Some people can see it. Others can read write. If I do this remote desktop, it's going to be exactly the same. It's going to use the native remote desktop client. So it'll launch Microsoft TSC, and it'll be just like you were there. The key is the user's already signed in with his external identity. That's why there's no additional sign-in. I don't need to worry about, the VNC port is open and VNC's passwords are 8 characters and unencrypted. I have to worry about that. It's the only thing that can get there. If I go back to the simple web application, so remember I can launch it here from profile, but I can just go to this window here, and I'm just going to type in a URL. I've set this to always challenge me to log in. So even though I'm signed in, it's going to force, so you see the login flow. First thing you do, this HMI is very trusting and there's no sign in at all. If you were locally on the site, just be bang in your face. We're on the internet, that's not going to fly. We're a G Suite shop, so I'm going to sign in with Google. You'll see that I don't have to supply my password again because it's cached in my browser. This is a secure token that is there, but my customer says you must have second factor. We're going to use biometric. In my case, my phone is going to chirp and say, is it you? But you could use a YubiKey, a fingerprint. You can also use Authy or Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, and just type a code in. And this works even without network access. So we click that, and the phone should chirp. And the phone is chirped. And I click, and I look at it with my face, and it scans me with the radar, and away we go. So at this stage, I'm logged in, and there's my HMI. And I can go make some changes. Don't worry, it's not a real plant. It's all fake, so opening and closing valves doesn't hurt anybody. But you get the idea. I was able to, on any device, anywhere, I could have pulled over to the side of the road and pulled a tablet out with a cellular connection because my customer has an emergency, and I don't have to worry about, oh, the Windows PC that has the VPN is in the laptop and I'm at my cottage. It works from anywhere, any user, any device, any network, any user. And that's really important, that any user bit. I was able to sign in with my G Suite account, even though my customer might use Office 365 Azure. My other system integrator that works with it might have signed in with their Azure account. The login would have looked just like they're logging into Office 365. In fact, it's Microsoft's HTML. In the URL bar, you would see their domain name. There's no passwords flow into our system. There's nothing to breach. That's what helps the customer get the certainty. So they can just turn you off an identity provider, the user's gone? Yes. So there's an audit trail. I can see all activity for that user? Yes. The user says, you mean I can use it with just a browser? I don't have to install a bunch of weird software? Yes. Now I hear you say, but I have a bunch of weird software and I like it. I run Rockwell Studio. I run this, I run that. Of course, you're going to do that. And that doesn't suddenly magically become browser-based. We have a concept called a launcher. It just sort of wraps the start menu icon and you launch it exactly the same way you always did. But once in a while, a browser will open during that launch and ask you to prove who you are, and then it will tunnel you through as is, but just that application. So if you run something like Microsoft's reporting services, you don't want them to be able to get like an SQL desktop open on it because the VPN would let you do that. Instead, you want just the report system to go there. That's what we're talking about. User, application, identity, the what, the how, all tied together in one. It's important in all aspects of computing and IT and operational technology. In industrial control systems, critical infrastructure, it's really important because people's lives and their livelihoods are at stake. You know, an energy pipeline blowing up is going to cause a lot of damage. A water treatment plant putting too much chlorine in is going to cause a lot of damage. We can't take away the ability to do our jobs. We can't make the underlying systems more secure. But what we can do is we can bring that modern identity, pair it with that very tight authorization and say, this user can do this action on that system. And then we can get everybody together and say, we all agree that that's what we want. It's a sufficient air gap for my system needs. There's no inbound general connectivity. There's no east-west connectivity. Everything is what it says it is. We're good to go. And multi-factor is present. I didn't show today, but I could have shown multi-factor on SSH. Same concept. I SSH the host. A browser pops up to prove who I am, accepts the second factor, goes away, SSH continues, just using the regular OpenSSH or PuTTY, or works with any SSH client because it uses a concept called proxy command, and boom, suddenly you've got two-factor on SSH, on Telnet, on a printer, on a PLC, on this, on that, and the other thing. You didn't have to change any of the destination systems. You didn't have to install any software on the client. You didn't have to retrain people. Everybody's happy. Microsegmentation never looked so good. So with that, I open it to questions. You may type them in the chat. You may email them afterwards. Bridget is going to paste a little bit in here. We have a case study online on our website if you want to take a look at how we did this with a municipal water treatment plant and sort of bridge that gap between the person who runs it, the person who owns it, and the internet. But I'll hang here for a couple minutes to see if there is a question. People are often shy to type questions in the chat. The recording will be available afterwards. I will email that to you, or you can click a link here and get it. So with that, I will do the awkward 5-minute wait for questions. This is where I usually have some really good jokes, but people tell me they've heard the jokes too many times, so sometimes they get sad about it. I find them funny each time because I forget them, but you know. This is a great one I used to tell about this bear. There's two hikers out hiking, and they come upon a bear. One bends over to tie his shoes, and the first one says, "You can't run a bear. I just need to outrun you." And that's what I think about in security. You don't need to be perfect security. You just need to be better than your neighbor, because your neighbor's the one that didn't tie their shoes and they got eaten by a bear. All right, we got a raised hand. Feel free to just type if you want the question, I think. How's the cost structure set up? Great question. Our pricing is public and online, but in general, it's per user and per site. But if you look on our website under pricing, you'll see it. Bridget's pasted the link. Okay, I see a couple of typing still, so I'll just keep hanging here. But I do appreciate your time today. I know that it's summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, and sometimes it's nice outside, and sometimes it's easier not to attend webinars and learn about new stuff, but easier to sit by the pool. So thank you so much. Use in conjunction specifically with Niche and SCADA. Yes, we definitely have customers who are using us with Inductive, and it's relatively straightforward there. Their system is really fantastic. A little Java-based thing, runs on a Raspberry Pi, runs on an industrial PC, etc. And it's that web interface works really well with our web identity-aware web application firewall. And you can take one of those that's in a private site with no IP access and have it in the hands of your users or yourself or your partners within literally minutes. There's no reconfiguration needed. If you want to spend some more time on the firewall rules, you can also control specific operations. So specific users could be prohibited from making changes, but it is something that's pretty straightforward to achieve with Inductive. Similarly with VT-SCADA, for some of you who integrate that product, we have customers using that one as well. Same concept, whether it's the thin client or the thick client for it. Okay, with that, I think we've probably run out the questions. My email is don@agilicus.com. You can feel free to email me and tell me you liked or you disliked or you have a question. We'll follow up afterwards with the recording of this, but it is on the page that Bridget has linked above there. And thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.